Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Independent Living Movement Ireland, I'm delighted to welcome you here this morning to the launch of our position paper supporting the involvement of disabled people in political parties. My name is Audrey Wilson. I am a community navigator working on the ILMI onsite project and your MC for this short webinar. Please note that this event is being recorded and ISL is being provided by Orla. The chat function has been disabled, but if anyone has any queries about the event or our position paper, they can email info@ilmi.ie. Many of you will already be aware of ILMI and our work. You will know that we are a disabled persons organisation, a DPO. This means that we are governed by disabled people for disabled people. We are not a service provider. Rather, we draw on collective lived experience of our members and amplify their voices on issues that are important to them. We are cross-impairment. Our work is underpinned by an understanding of the social model. The model says that disability is caused by the way society is organised rather than by a person's impairment. It looks at ways of removing barriers that restrict life choices for disabled people. You will also know that we work from a disability equality perspective. This is a belief that we, as disabled people, should enjoy equal rights and opportunities to participate in economic, social, cultural, and of course, political life. We should have choice and control over how we live our lives and how we are enabled to reach our full potential. The launch of today's paper is one example of how ILMI are working towards that goal. So just a few notes on the agenda for this morning. We'll have some opening remarks from an ILMI representative who will begin proceedings. This will then be followed by James Cawley, ILMI Policy Officer, who will present the process of how we developed our position paper and provide analysis of some of the key findings. This will be followed by inputs by Minister Burke and Minister Rabbitte. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Damien Walsh, our ILMI CEO, to say a few words.
Many thanks, Audrey. I just wanted to thank everyone for attending today. I particularly would like to thank all the ILMI members who participated in our discussion space to create the analysis for the paper that James is going to launch in a few moments. It's really important that as a disabled persons organisation that we create spaces for disabled activists to collectively analyse the challenges that they experience, but then to present the models of best practice to actually look at the implementation of policy, particularly in relation to the UNCRPD, which the state makes its first report in this year. ILMI is committed to look at practical measures to implement the articles of the UNCRPD. And today we begin by looking at Article 29 to enable the participation of disabled people within the political system. The consultation that we held featured disabled activists and disabled people who are either in office or had ran for office. So it's very much based on the lived practical experiences of disabled politicians and how we can genuinely make the political system participative and inclusive. So I want to thank all the disabled people who participated in that consultation. I'd also like to thank James and the staff for bringing the position paper to reality. And I specifically want to thank the two ministers who are here today to be part of this launch, showing their continued commitment to supporting ILMI as a disabled persons organisation, but also to genuinely looking at what the implementation of the UNCRPD would look like to genuinely build an inclusive republic in the 21st century. So on that basis, thanks very much to Audrey for acting as host. I will now pass back over to Audrey for the next session.
Thanks, Damien, for that. And I'm now delighted to introduce my colleague, James Cawley, ILMI Policy Officer, to say a few words. James.
Thanks, Audrey, and thanks, Damien. And I'm looking forward to hearing Minister Rabbitte and Mr. Burke later on in the webinar. First of all, I'm delighted to present our ILMI position paper, Enabling Participation and Supporting the Involvement of Disabled People in Political Parties, here to you this morning. I suppose, as Damien said, over the course of 2021, ILMI brought together disabled activists, including those who've run for office and are elected in politics, to discuss the barriers to participation that exist for disabled people in Irish politics. And we wanted to look at the measures that we need to have or to be brought forward in place to address this exclusion in relation to disabled people in access in politics and political life. This morning, I want to present three key messages to you. The first is the issues disabled people identified that prevented the participation of disabled people, or do prevent the participation of disabled people in politics in Ireland. The second is what needs to happen to make politics inclusive for disabled people. And finally, I want to conclude by saying what we can do at a political party level to ensure the participation of disabled people. In terms of the issues, as we all know, access to political meetings can be sometimes tricky for us. And we all know the importance of participation in local politics to seek nomination for office. However, there is a shortage of fully accessible private spaces for political parties to organise these events in. So more often than not, political parties are held in pubs, for example, and these are often inaccessible in terms of stairs, lack of accessible bathrooms, and also can create issues for those in relation to noise for people with sensory impairments. Another issue is that disabled candidates need to be able to interact directly with the electorate, and we know the importance of being able to having to build up your rapport in relation to canvassing, etc., and to build up your reputation to be a local politician and to run for office, for example. However, inaccessible infrastructure, the lack of accessible spaces, and lack of accessible transport can limit disabled candidates and politicians from building up their profile. And of course, the lack of accessible transport options were highlighted more in rural areas in the country when we spoke to the group of people and the consultations that we did. As we're all aware, in December last year, we saw the launch, the publication of the Cost of Disability report published by the Department of Social Protection. And we know from that report that disabled people have additional costs in relation to their impairment, costing on average €9,000 to €12,000 extra a year if you have an impairment in Ireland. We also know from other research that disabled people, or fewer disabled people, are employed in Ireland. And we know that elections are expensive and that these additional costs present an additional barrier to encouraging disabled people to run for office. Disabled candidates may need additional supports, such as personal assistance services hours, to perform tasks for them, for example, driving a car, providing door-to-door support when canvassing, handing out leaflets, etc. But also another example is that, say, for example, if you're a deaf candidate, you would need and require ISL interpreters for meetings at party levels, canvassing door-to-door, or attending local meetings. We know from this paper that there have been instances where disabled people have been told by service providers that they cannot have their personal assistants attend political meetings due to restrictions placed by the HSE funding through Section 39 organisations. All of these issues outlined can limit our participation in political life. Going to the second part of the pie, if you like, what needs to happen to make politics more inclusive for disabled people? Well, at a statutory level, as per Article 19 of the UNCRPD, the state needs to take proactive steps to embed inclusion in the political system to ensure that the participation of disabled candidates can be seen. And this can be done in a number of ways. The first is establishing and resourcing a specific election fund for disabled candidates to level the playing field for disabled people to participate in political campaigns. And we know this has been proven to work in other jurisdictions to encourage the participation of disabled people in elections. So why not in Ireland? There needs to be a clarification that disabled people can use their independent living supports, such as personal assistance services, to support their involvement in politics, at branch meetings, canvassing, networking, and attending political meetings. As we know, and as a person who uses a personal assistance service to live independently, It's about ensuring that people like myself and disabled people can have autonomy and agency in their lives, which should allow us to have choice and control in all parts of our lives, including politics. Another measure which we believe would make politics more inclusive is that the Taoiseach nomination process to the Seanad should include a disabled activist with direct links to the community through disabled persons organisations or DPOs, which are, as Audrey said, led by and for disabled people. And we've seen this quite successfully done in the nomination of Senator Eileen Flynn, who had a hugely symbolic effect, if you like, as the first Traveller woman elected to the Seanad. We would love to see a similar measure to elect a disabled activist to the Seanad, which would create a voice for disabled people at the highest level of office and would be in line with our mantra, nothing about us without us. Finally, I want to bring to an end around the third piece, where we look at the political parties and what can we all do as politicians and people in our political parties. Well, Section 42 of the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission Act 2014 outlines that any organisation in receipt of public funds have responsibility to promote equality, to prevent discrimination, and to protect the human rights of their employees, their customers, their service providers, or their service users even, and to everyone affected by their policies and plans. Remember, this is a legal obligation which is called the Public Sector and Equality and Human Rights Duty. So all political parties under this duty should make sure that you engage with disabled persons organisations to disability equality proof your policies and procedures. You should ensure that all party headquarters and branch level venues that are chosen for party meetings are made accessible and fully accessible to disabled people to ensure their active participation is made at that level. And I just want to say we have to remember as well, accessibility is not just steps, it's not just ramps, it's about communication and information and making that accessible to everyone. Finally, political parties should set up specific working groups for disabled people and develop structural supports that disabled people and their groups of members of parties can feed their views into national executive, which would be really, really beneficial. And before I conclude, I just want to say we all went through a COVID pandemic and we've seen the value of online meetings and that blended approach. And I think that's something else we could bring to this, where, you know, political parties could offer that option of a blended approach of meetings, i.e. face-to-face or online meetings, which would allow disabled people to work with their political parties to identify what works best for them. I just want to leave you with a concluding thought for today, and just to remember that independent living is not about us living on our own, but it's about having the freedom to have the same choices that everyone else has in housing and transportation and education and employment. But it's also about choosing what aspects of economic, social and political life we want to participate in. To have control over your life, to have a family, to get a job, to buy the flowers for Valentine's Day. And this can all be done with the support of personal assistance and our independent living supports. I want to finally conclude by saying we all know that Ireland has ratified the UNCRPD, and Article 29 of this convention states that disabled people have the right to political and public life like everyone else. And I think moving towards some of the solutions we outline in our paper would be a concrete way to implement Article 29 of this convention and see more disabled people enter into politics. I want to finally just say thank you to everyone for attending our webinar this morning. And for anyone who's registered, you will receive a copy of the paper, or you can catch it on our website on www.ilmi.ie. I'll now hand you back over to Audrey. Thank you.
Thank you, James, for that very comprehensive overview and for indeed highlighting the issues, but also the solutions. And we do really hope that today's launch and this position paper will inspire, be a catalyst to result in more inclusive politics. So thank you, James, for your input. So I'm now going to ask Minister Burke to say a few words. Minister Burke.
Thank you very much, Audrey, and all the panelists for this very interesting event today. As Minister of State with responsibility for local government, I'm delighted to be here for the launch of Enabling Participation, supporting the involvement of disabled people in political parties position paper prepared by Independent Living Movement Ireland. I commend everyone at Independent Living Movement Ireland, who I'm privileged and value the great work that they do to be able to be in a position to try and implement and work with it, for investing in this important subject matter, examining the barriers for people with disabilities and to enter politics, and clearly setting out how such barriers and difficulties can be addressed to make politics more inclusive for all. I think that's key in terms of the thread of the discussion, where we're absolutely showing and charting the way of how this can be done, as opposed to identifying the issues. I should say that the department had previously funded such research into barriers for various groups entering politics. National Women's Council of Ireland commissioned research, Women Beyond the Dáil, More Women in Local Government, which is referenced in the programme for government. Women for Election undertook research into women's experience in running for election in Ireland, and the Immigrant Council of Ireland also undertook extensive research following the 2019 local elections and the experience and barriers that migrants faced when campaigning as candidates. The findings that come from these research papers, along with the position paper being launched here today, have a common thread. The political parties are instrumental in ensuring that Ireland has a more balanced and inclusive politics. I firmly believe that it is absolutely essential that local government in Ireland is fully reflective of the diversity of the society and community that it serves. The low level of representation in some elements of society, including people with disabilities, in local level politics is therefore hugely concerning. It is an issue that I am determined to address within my core responsibility as Minister for Local Government. The department and I are working hard to ensure that councillors are more representative of the constituents and indeed communities that they serve, and also that the role of councillor is more accessible, manageable and critically sustainable. Our annual calls for funding to political parties, local level caucuses and local authorities themselves encourage underrepresented groups to participate in political life by finding new innovative projects right across the country. And in 2021, I approved funding of over 300,000 to support initiatives such as awareness campaigns, mentoring programs, research and diversity officers. In 2021, the department reviewed the support provided to political parties, and as a result, we adjusted that support to ensure a stronger focus on increasing gender and diversity among candidates with a view to the 2024 local elections. Following extensive engagement with political parties, the 2021 call for funding to political parties requested that proposals would clearly set out a strategic timeline over the next 3 years to support and prepare individuals from a more diverse background for election. By actively supporting the initiatives to be taken by political parties, our hope is that we will achieve increased candidate participation from such groups in the local elections of 2024. As a result of the excellent and substantial proposals received, funding approvals considerably increased from previous years. We're also advancing a number of other progressive policies to ensure people from all walks of life see running for local government as a viable option, such as the provision of maternity leave for councillors, the establishment of a local women's caucus, as well as the recent major reform of councillors' remuneration, making the role more sustainable for everyone involved. Alongside this work, my department has also made a number of significant steps towards ensuring that all citizens participate in the voting process. Recognising that people with disabilities have particular needs, a working group on disability voting was established in 2018, made up of a number of representatives from the department, the National Disability Authority, NCBI, the Irish Wheelchair Association and the Disability Federation. My department and the working group have sought to address a number of wheelchair inaccessible polling stations throughout the country, with a number reduced by 50% between 2019 local elections and the 2020 general elections, and still much more work to be done. Following consultations with the NDA and NCBI, my department also introduced tactile devices to ensure and facilitate independent voting by visually impaired persons at elections and referenda. These devices have been available at polling stations throughout the country since 2018. While we celebrate the progress being made, we absolutely recognise that there is so much more that we can do to ensure the voting process is accessible and inclusive for as many people as possible. For example, in June 2021, the government approved proposals which will ensure that voters with any illness or disability, physical or mental, will have equal access to postal and special voting arrangements. Work is also ongoing in the department to develop a new streamlined voter registration process to replace the current set of forms, and consultation has been undertaken with the National Disability Authority and the National Adult Literacy Agency to ensure these forms are simple, effective and accessible to all. It is with great pleasure then to see the work of the group like Independent Living Movement Ireland, whose fundamental aim that disabled people can achieve choice and control in their lives with full participation in society as equal citizens, aligns perfectly with the work of me and my department. It is my hope that with the launch of this paper and our continued individual efforts and collaborations, we can ensure that local government and government in general can become as wonderful as the diverse country that we represent. Position papers such as this being launched here today are absolutely so valuable to inform future policies that will assist in implementation of the key actions that create a more accessible political platform for all, and that I sincerely in that regard commend all the work that's been done by the group in launching this paper. I also want to say an enormous thank you to Des Kenny and everyone at ILMI for inviting me here to participate in the launch this morning. And it is an absolute challenge that we will rise to try and ensure equal access for all citizens and that they can participate in the political process. And we will leave no stone unturned in terms of myself and Minister Rabbitte in our term in government. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Burke, and absolutely, ILMI, we fully support the vision for a local government that's fully reflective of the community it serves, and of course the disabled people in that community as well. So thank you for those comments. Last but not least, I'm going to introduce Minister Rabbitte. Minister Rabbitte has been a long-term friend of ILMI, a long-term supporter, and we're delighted to have her here today. So Minister Rabbitte, if you'd like to say a few words.
Thanks a million, Audrey, and thank you very much for the introduction. And I want to start by thanking James in what he has presented there in the position policy paper by ILMI. It's very refreshing to hear you have come with suggestions, but you've also come with real tangible solutions. And I know Minister Burke and myself will take that on board. Too often in politics, we always hear what needs to be done, but nobody ever tells us how we might be able to achieve it or do it. So it is refreshing to come on this Zoom this morning to hear a position paper with suggestions and with actually possible tangible solutions. And as Minister Burke says, I will leave no stone unturned along with his good office, that we will ensure that we will have that equal participation and inclusion. And that is not just equal participation and inclusion with the opportunity to vote. It is also the equal participation opportunity to participate, no different to myself or Minister Burke or any of the councillors that might be on this call today, that a person with a disability can also represent people in their community, be it at a local level or at a wider Senate or a Oireachtas level. And that's what makes us the wonderful democracy we are. That is that participation for all voices. And James, you referenced quite rightly earlier on with the Taoiseachtas or the Taoiseach's nominees. And that is a really good space as well to bring voices to a national platform. So yes, I want to thank the ILMI for inviting me today to launch this position paper. I've had a number of discussions with government colleagues, disabled people and the ILMI about the barriers people with disabilities face accessing politics. And thanks to Minister Burke for his remarks, which I think identifies some of the ways the government are trying to address the barriers and how we can improve and be more supportive to ensure that our political system is more reflective of the diversity of our population, including our disabled population. As identified in the ILMI report itself, we need to do more to better support people with disabilities to participate in politics and to make valuable contributions at all levels of government and governance in the state. I think the suggestions put forward by the ILMI here today are certainly worth considering, and it's easy to see the merits, and they would go a long way to help level the playing field. And I think, James, you talked there in relation to the accessing the PARs and the HSE's governance piece around how they can and can't be used. That to me is a very workable piece for ensuring that where a person would need the PA support. Speaking as a politician, Article 29 rings particularly true, and I think all politicians here today just know how important it is to have support when entering the political area. Drawn on my own constituency, I remember during the general election of 2020, there was an issue with accessibility at polling stations and how people with disabilities, older people or people who had mobility issues, faced real issues with even going to vote, never mind running in an election. And I think Minister Burke has really addressed that really comprehensively there. And I know that there's a good friend of ILMI, Vivian Raft, who has done a lot of work in relation to speaking about that. So that in its very essence, being able to participate and the right to cast your vote to seek the person who represents you is awful important. We need to make sure we have these basics rights, and I know Minister Burke and his colleagues are doing great work in this space. Putting back on my minister's hat, I can confirm Ireland is committed to progressively realising the rights of all people with disabilities under the UNCRPD, and this includes the right to participate in political and public life. A key step for the realisation of the CRPD is the passage of the Assisted Decision Making Capacity Amendment Bill. And this legislation will end wardship and put in place an entirely new functional capacity model. And as part of this, we will repeal the outdated and discriminatory ban on persons of unsound mind running for political office. And this will be delivered by the end of this year. And it comes in to the committee stage today, first discussions on it. Through the National Disability Inclusion Strategy, we are making good progress towards improving the accessibility of voting and voter information in supporting people with disabilities in the achievement of active citizenship and engagement. Also through the NDIS, I am chairing a working group with taking a whole of government approach to reviewing the transport issues that many people with disability presently face. And we look forward to making significant advancements in that regard this year. The whole of government response to the cost of disability report is being coordinated through the NDIS steering group, which I also chair, discussed the report within the last 24 hours. And it was also discussed as soon as it was launched. And I think, James, you were in attendance there on the day representing ILMI, that it was launched by Minister Humphreys one day, and we discussed it the very next day. We take this role very, very seriously. And I would also like to think that under this government, we'll see great strides being made across accessibility in all forms, as outlined in the ILMI paper. And it's great to see an increased focus on political end on the UNCRPD and how it needs to work on the ground. And thanks very much to the ILMI for shining the spotlight on this, not just talking about, but bringing forward real possible changes which could make huge differences. We are conscious of the challenges to more equal participation faced by people and are working hard to address these barriers that still exist to support people with disabilities to engage in public and political life. And of course, we need to do more. And I very much look forward to working with Minister Burke, working with the policy unit within the ILMI in driving forward that change. As we say, we're coming out of COVID, and what we need to actually reset the dial and bring a positive change. And I think it's time now that disability was front and centre being part of that change. And it should not be just part of the change on a policy paper. That policy paper needs to be realised within real action. And real action is where we see persons with disability participate at local and national politics. And I know myself and Minister Burke are committed to that. Finally, I want to thank Orla for her hard work there in interpreting all the way through this. So thank you very much again for the invite, and I look forward to working with you into the future.
Thank you, Minister Burke, for your comments and for your very engaged response to our position paper. I think your passion for change is really evident. And Absolutely, disability should be front and center. We couldn't agree more with that. So in closing, ILMI, we would like to extend our thanks, first of all, to Orla for providing ISL for us this morning, to Damien and James for their inputs on behalf of ILMI, and of course to Minister Burke and Minister Rabbitte for their time and ongoing commitment to making Irish politics truly inclusive for disabled people. Just a reminder that the position paper is now on the ILMI website, www.ilmi.ie. You'll find it under the Key Policy Documents tab. The link will be sent to everyone who's registered for the launch today. And of course, if you are interested in our wider work, please do sign up to our e-bulletin, and you can do that by emailing info@ilmi.ie. Thank you very much.